There are stories that hurt the soul, that leave marks not on the body, but in every corner of the heart. And there are betrayals that don't come with screams, fights, or confessions, but rather with the brutal silence of those who return home and bring another woman in their arms. This story is one of those. It's real, it's strong, it's painful, and it will move you. She loved, trusted, and gave of herself. She was the kind of woman who believed that love could conquer everything, that marriage was about partnership, complicity, and trust. For years, she was the pillar of that home, the invisible foundation that supported every little bit of life. They built together while he went out to work. She held everything together, the house, the children, the routine, the emotions. She never complained, not even when loneliness was pressing, not even when his eyes no longer shone when he saw her, not even when the kisses became shorter, the hugs rarer, and the conversations became just an exchange of practical information. Still, she believed it was just a phase, that marriages go through ups and downs, that he was just tired, stressed, overwhelmed. She believed it strongly, until the day he came home from work with another woman. Yes, you heard that right. He didn't call, he didn't text, he didn't warn, he just showed up, with bags, with a cold expression, and with another woman by his side. The scene was like something out of a nightmare. The kind of thing you hear about in other people's stories, but never imagine could happen to you. She was making dinner. She had made his favorite food. She had set the table with care. She had put on a nice outfit, hoping to rekindle some kind of connection, and he walked in, holding another woman's hand, as if he were returning from some walk, as if it were natural, as if she, his wife, was just a stranger on the road. In that instant, her world stopped. Time froze. The ground disappeared, and her soul shattered. There was no explanation. There was no apology. There was no shame. He just said, "Things have changed. I've changed. I want to start over." With her, she who gave her all, who was by his side in the worst moments, who believed in love, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. Now she was discarded, as if she were an old object, a burden, a nuisance. This is where our story truly begins, because the pain she felt at that moment is not easy to explain. It is a mixture of disbelief, revolt, humiliation, and a sadness so deep that it seems to corrode her from within. And the cruelest, she already suspected. Yes, days before, weeks, maybe, something inside her started screaming. An instinct, an uncomfortable feeling, a strange silence, a change in his gaze. A cell phone always turned upside down, a coldness that hurt more than any words. But she didn't want to believe. She didn't want to be that woman who searches, who suspects, who lives in fear. She wanted to trust. She wanted to maintain her dignity. She wanted to hold on to the idea that love still existed. Unfortunately, he was no more, at least, not on his part. And now, she had to make difficult decisions. He wanted her to leave the house they had built together, to just leave it all behind, with children, bills, memories, and pain. But she was not weak, she was not disposable, and she wasn't going to allow him to rewrite their story with such cruelty without hearing her side of the story. And that's exactly what you're going to hear now. The real version, the other side of the story, told by herself. Get ready to follow an intimate, intense story, full of truths, tears, and overcoming. If you've ever been cheated on, you'll see yourself in this story. If you've never been through this, you might understand better the pain that many women hide behind forced smiles. Because the story that begins now is not just about betrayal, it's about starting over. After being broken, it's about being strong, when all you want to do is fall apart. And now I ask you, if it were you, what would you do? Would you have the strength to continue? Would you leave everything behind? Or would you fight for justice, for dignity, for self-love? Comment below. What would you do in this absurd situation? Your comment may help other women not feel alone. Like, subscribe, and activate the bell. This is just the first part of a real, intense, and necessary story. Follow it to the end, you will be surprised.
Hello, my name is Erica, and to this day I wonder where I got lost, or rather, where did lost me, and decided to move on as if I had never existed. I know that many people may judge me, think that I was naive, that I blinded myself, and maybe I did, but not because I was stupid, but because I loved him. I believed in him until the last second. And that, honestly, is what hurts me the most today. We were together for 11 years, 3 children, a house built from scratch with bricks, sweat and dreams, and a love that, at least on my part, was always real. I met FBio when I was still in college. He was already working at a transport company. He had that rustic way about him, but with a smile that disarmed me. We had nothing in common, just the desire to grow together. And we did, or at least I thought we did. The first few years were difficult but beautiful. I remember the nights when we would cuddle on the couch with a packet of noodles and an old blanket, dreaming about the future. He would say he wanted to give me everything, and I would say I only wanted him close. When our children were born, he cried. He seemed like the happiest man in the world. He was present, loving, caring, and I felt like the most loved woman on earth. But time is cruel to those who love too much. Because I remained whole, and he started to pull away. I thought it was work, that he was tired, stressed, that the weight of the bills and the routine had killed the romance. And I tried to rekindle it. I prepared surprises. I tried to talk. I got ready. I made dinner by candlelight. But he started to look at me as if I were a nuisance, a burden, as if he was doing me a favor by still being there. That's when I started to get suspicious. The cell phone became a secret. Business trips got longer. He started sleeping with the screen facing down. And when I asked him, he always said, "You're crazy. You're insecure. You're seeing things where there's nothing there." And I swallowed it. I swallowed it because I was afraid of losing it. Because I didn't want to destroy our family. Because I thought it was just a phase. Until that day, that damn day, I had made the lasagna he loved. I tidied the house, put on a red blouse he said he liked. The children were in the living room, and I was anxiously waiting silly for the man I loved to come home from work. When I heard the car, I felt butterflies in my stomach. I ran to the door with a smile on my face, and there he was, with another woman, with his bags. My world fell apart. There was no fight, no shouting, no scandal, because I simply froze. My body didn't move. My mind didn't understand. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Rika, I want to move on with my life. We haven't worked out for a while. This is Vanessa. We're together. I'm going to live with her." It was that simple. As if he had just ordered a coffee. As if I wasn't the mother of his children. As if 11 years could fit into 3 sentences. I was shaking. The ground seemed to have disappeared. The children were behind me, not understanding. And all I could say was, "Are you throwing me out of our house?" He replied coldly, "This house is mine. It was my money. You should find another place." At that moment, a strange force took hold of me. It wasn't anger. It was dignity. It was the blood rising. It was the soul waking up. I looked at him. I looked at her. And I said, "You're not coming in." And I closed the door. I locked it. I sat on the floor. I cried. I cried like I'd never cried in my life. But I didn't let him destroy me. At least not there. That night, I slept on the living room floor, hugging my children. They cried. I lied. I said that Daddy was going to sleep outside, that everything was fine, but my heart was bleeding. The next day, he came back, alone. He knocked. He said he needed to talk. I let him in, and then he started spilling everything. He said he had been with Vanessa for almost a year, that he no longer felt anything for me, that I had become boring, that he needed a woman who would make him feel alive. Yes, he said that, after everything, after I gave up my career for him, after taking care of the house, the children, carrying the weight of a home alone, he called me boring. I listened and all I could think was, "Who are you? What have you done to the man who promised me the world?" And then he said the worst, that he had already gone to the notary's office, that he was going to file a lawsuit to take the house away from me, that he wanted joint custody, and that Vanessa would be a great stepmother. Right then, I almost threw up. Seriously, I was shaking. My face was burning. My head was spinning, but I took a deep breath. I looked at him, and I said, You may have fooled me, FBio, but you won't destroy me, and much less destroy our children with this filth." He left, and I was left there, alone, scared, angry, with a hole in my chest, but also with a crazy desire to fight, not for him, but for myself, for the woman I was before I forgot myself because of a man. In the days that followed, I went to the lawyer. I sought out my rights. I spoke to my children carefully. I rebuilt myself, little by little. The pain was still throbbing, but something inside me was already beginning to say, "You're going to be okay. You're going to be stronger than this." But the story isn't over yet, because Vanessa had secrets. Secrets that FBio never imagined. And destiny. Oh, destiny took care of doing justice. But that, I'll tell you in the next part. After that day, everything changed. What was once routine became survival. The mornings became heavy, the days long, the nights eternal. I woke up and pretended to myself that everything was under control, that it was just a difficult phase, that the pain would pass. But deep down, I knew something had broken, and I didn't know how to fix it. Fabio stopped knocking on my door. He started sending cold, direct messages. Things like, "I'll send the documents by email, talk to the lawyer, send the children's clothes in the backpack." He didn't ask if the children were okay. He didn't want to know if I had food in the fridge, if the bills were paid, if the children were crying at night. He simply disappeared emotionally. And the woman he put in place of our family, well, she started to show up more and more. Vanessa was the opposite of me. Young, with a sculpted body, impeccable makeup, and expensive clothes. She made a point of posting pictures with him, as if he were a trophy. And worst of all, with my children. Yes, my children in her arms, smiling, with captions like, "Family is everything to me." I read that and felt like screaming. Screaming to the world that that woman had invaded my life, taken what was mine, pretending to be good, when in fact she had destroyed a home. But I didn't scream. I didn't explode. I kept quiet, because I knew that any scandal would be used against me in the trial. I had to be smart, cold, if necessary. So I kept every pain, every tear, every indignation inside. I focused on my children, the legal process, and keeping my sanity. Until one day, Vanessa called. Yes, she had the audacity to call me. Her voice was sweet, almost fake. She said she wanted to talk like grown women, that she knew the situation was delicate, but that she loved the children very much and wanted to establish a good relationship. I swear I choked with anger. How could she have the nerve? How could this woman, who entered my life through the back door, now want to pretend to be diplomatic? I took a deep breath, swallowed my tears, and said calmly, "You will never be the mother of my children, and it is not with you that I decide my life. It is with their father, and he has already chosen to leave. So please do not look for me anymore." She hung up, and I was shaking, not with fear, with hatred, with helplessness. Because there was no justice at that moment, only humiliation. And this humiliation grew even more when, a week later, FBio showed up with an absurd proposal. He wanted me to leave the house in exchange for an amicable settlement in the divorce. According to him, if I left the house, he would give up part of the custody and give me a fair pension. That's when I finally realized it. He was trying to buy my dignity, trading affection for bricks, trying to erase years of history with a signed document and a sum of money. I refused. Of course I refused. And he didn't like it at all. He started playing dirty. He said I was alienating the children, that I spoke badly of him to the neighbors, that I was emotionally imbalanced. They started watching me. I was even called to the Child Protection Services due to an anonymous complaint which I knew very well where it came from. They wanted to paint me as unstable, as someone dangerous to my own children, but I didn't give in. I went there, gave my statement with my head held high, showed my documents, talked to social workers, received visits at home, and I was approved for everything. Because despite everything, I never let love and care be lacking in that home. The children were well fed, attended school, had a routine, affection, and knew they were loved. And that weighed in my favor in the process. It was the first small victory I had after so much suffering. But not everything stopped there. A few weeks later, I received a strange message on Instagram. It was from a profile without a photo. The person said they needed to tell me the truth about Vanessa. At first, I thought it was a prank, but something made me keep reading. The message said, You don't know the real Vanessa. She has destroyed other families before. FBIO is just another one. She will make you suffer until the end. I asked for proof. And what came next took my breath away. Photos, prints, conversations, testimonies from other women, reports that Vanessa had been involved with married men before, that she used emotional blackmail, that she made everything seem like a fairy tale at first. But then, it turned into a nightmare. One of the women reported that her ex-husband had to flee the country because of the debts that Vanessa put in his name. Another said that she used her children as a shield, pretended to be a victim, manipulated everything. I was shocked, but also, in a way, I felt relieved. I wasn't crazy. That woman really was a fraud. And Fabio, well, he was bewitched. But the worst was yet to come. 2 weeks later, I picked up my children from his house. He now lived with Vanessa. When I arrived, I noticed a strange atmosphere. The children were agitated, but they didn't say anything. On the way back, my youngest son, only 6 years old, asked me, "Mommy, why does Annie yell at Daddy when he sleeps on the couch?" I froze. I asked him what he had seen, and he said that his father and Vanessa were fighting a lot, that he cried, that sometimes he slept in the car, that she called him useless and threw things at the wall. My heart broke again. I didn't wish any harm on FBIO. Not at all. As much as he had hurt me, he was the father of my children, and I never wanted them to witness violence, screaming, aggression. I was stuck with that for days. I thought about calling. I thought about writing, but I kept quiet because it wasn't my place anymore. But fate, it has its ways of adjusting things. A month later, I received a notice from his lawyer. FBIO wanted to temporarily suspend contact with his children. He claimed emotional instability. At the time, I thought it was just another scam, but at the same time, I knew something was wrong. I followed him, discreetly. I discovered that FBIO had gone to live with his mother, that he had left the house he was living in with Vanessa, and that she had disappeared, literally, taking money, furniture, personal objects, abandoning everything, without explanation. And that's when I understood. The game had changed. The woman he chose to start over with simply destroyed what little was left of him. And now he was broken. For the first time, I saw a reflection of what I had been months before. And as much as it hurt to admit it, I felt sorry. But it wasn't time to forgive yet, or to help. There were still many unresolved issues, many open wounds. And more than that, I wanted him to understand, for FBIO to truly understand what he had done to me, to the children, to our history. When I found out Vanessa was gone, the first thing I felt was a strange relief. It wasn't happiness or revenge. It was like a pressure had been lifted from my chest, like air was circulating inside me again. For a while, I had convinced myself that she was above me, that he had traded his family for someone better. But when she vanished with everything, taking not only his clothes and furniture but the last bit of illusion he still had, it became clear. It wasn't about me. It never was. The fault was his, and I spent months beating myself up over something that never had anything to do with my worth. FBIO remained silent for a while. He disappeared. He didn't even show up to pick up his children. His messages, which had previously been arrogant and provocative, were now lukewarm. His answers were short and evasive, as if he were trying to hide his own shame. Until one day, after almost 3 weeks without any real contact, he appeared at the door. He was thinner. His eyes were sunken. His face was haggard. He was holding a bag of toys, but his posture was that of someone who didn't know where to hide his face. "Can I see the kids?" he asked. I just nodded curtly. I went and called the boys, and they ran to him. I stood there, watching the scene, and trying not to let my anger rise again. Because yes, it was revolting. It was too cruel to have to watch this attempt at rapprochement from a man who had left me in pieces, as if everything that had happened could be ignored. But I breathed. I kept quiet. I gave him my space, and I let him stay there with the kids for a few hours. After they went up to the bedroom, he stared at me with that empty look, as if he expected something from me. Maybe forgiveness, maybe understanding. But at that moment, I had neither. "Do you want coffee?" I asked, without looking directly at him. He accepted, and during those minutes in the kitchen, the silence was heavy, until he spoke. "I was wrong, Erica. I was very wrong. I kept my back to him, pretending to stir the thermos. He continued. She deceived me. She said she loved me, that she wanted a life with me, but she disappeared. She took everything. She said she couldn't stand my children anymore, that I wasn't what she really wanted. She left me with debts and a shame that I can't explain. He paused for a second. You always warned me. You always truly loved me. And I threw it all away. I feel like trash. That apology, if that's what it was, didn't touch me, because it was clear he wasn't sorry for what he did to me. He was suffering the consequences, and that's very different. It's not repentance, it's punishment. And as much as he wanted to fix things, I was no longer willing to fix what he had destroyed so coldly. Bio, I said calmly, what you did to me wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. You chose to lie. You chose to betray. You chose to turn your back on me, on your children, on our history. And now that things have gone wrong with her, you come back here thinking what? That we're going to pretend nothing happened? He lowered his head. He had no more arguments. And I had no more patience either. You will see the children. You will fulfill your responsibilities. But I am no longer your wife. And I do not want your guilt. I want you to be a father. That is all. He shook his head. He said he understood, that he would try to be better. But I no longer believed his words. What moved me now was my own strength. I no longer had room for delusion. After that visit, he became more present with his children. He started picking them up on weekends, started paying back part of what he owed, and tried to show interest. But I watched his efforts like someone watching a play, from afar, without getting involved. With each passing day, I became Erica again. Not Bio's wife, not the betrayed woman, but the Erica who liked music, walking down the street in the afternoon, feeling the wind on her face. I started looking at myself in the mirror again. I cut my hair. I took a yoga class. I started dreaming again. Small steps, but steps that took me forward. And it was during this silent walk that something unexpected happened. An old friend from college sent me a message. Raphael. He had seen a text I wrote in a group about motherhood and was moved. He said it reminded him of me, of my lightness, of the way I saw the world. I smiled when I read it, because it had been a long time since anyone had seen me that way. And we started talking, at first, innocently, exchanging experiences, memories, old jokes. But little by little, something began to blossom. A connection I hadn't expected or even looked for. And that's why it scared me. I confess that I hesitated. I was afraid of getting hurt again, afraid of trusting someone and reliving all that pain. But Raphael was different. He didn't demand anything from me. He didn't pressure me. He was just there, present, listening to me, respecting me, making me laugh, and little by little, making me feel alive. That was when Bio began to understand. The children talked about Uncle Rafa. Bio saw a photo, heard an audio, and freaked out. He started sending aggressive messages saying that I was exposing the children, that I was bringing men into the house. He said he was going to ask for custody, that he was going to take everything from me. But this time, I wasn't afraid, because I was firm, with evidence, with witnesses, with the law on my side, and most importantly, with a clear conscience. I called him, and for the first time, I told him everything without crying, without shaking. You had your chance, Fabio. You wasted it. Now deal with your choices. And if you try to intimidate me again, you will face justice. And you will lose. He was silent, and I hung up. I was shaking inside, but I felt like a giant. For the first time, I had protected myself, defended myself, put myself first. And the truth is that, when we heal, we start to bother those who fed off our pain. Bio never tried to threaten me again. He complied with what the law required, and he became just that, the father of my children. As for me, I was reborn, and Raphael, little by little, became part of my life, without rushing, without pressure, only with affection, listening, and respect. And for the first time after everything, I allowed myself to be happy without guilt, because I understood that true love does not destroy, it builds, and that being betrayed is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that we loved with everything, and the ones who lose are those who did not know how to value it. But the story doesn't end here, because what happened on our oldest son's birthday changed everything again. Our oldest son's birthday was a mix of hope and tension, a date that I had been waiting for with care and anxiety. But that ended up becoming the turning point I hadn't expected. From the beginning, I wanted it to be a simple celebration, focused on the children, away from any conflict. But when FBio showed up, accompanied by Vanessa, even after everything, I realized that peace was an illusion too distant for that moment. I planned the party at my mother's house, a neutral place where the kids could have fun without feeling overwhelmed. Vanessa, on the other hand, showed up wearing an expensive dress, impeccable makeup, and a smile that seemed too rehearsed. For the occasion, she arrived holding FBio's hand, and the two exchanged glances that made me feel like an outsider at a party that, deep down, had always been mine. The kids were excited, playing in the backyard while I tried to keep my cool and keep the party going. But I soon realized that Vanessa wasn't just here to pretend to be friendly or civil. She wanted to show me that she was here to stay, to take over the place I had worked so hard to build. She started making subtle comments loudly, as if I wasn't listening, about how small the house was, how old-fashioned the decor was, how the boys' toys were poor people's stuff. It was a disguised provocation, a game to get me out of the spotlight. Fabio, who had been quiet until then, approached and tried to intervene, telling her to control herself, but Vanessa just smiled, as if she knew exactly what she was doing. I felt my face burn, but I kept my composure. I didn't want the children to notice my pain, so I smiled, wished my son a happy birthday, and tried to ignore the poisonous innuendos. In the middle of the party, Vanessa decided to start a conversation with me. She said she wanted to better understand my relationship with FBio, how we had gotten to that point, that everything seemed very complicated. I answered her honestly, trying not to let my anger show. I explained that it was a betrayal, a choice he made, and that despite the pain, I was focused on rebuilding my life and taking care of the children. Vanessa listened, but with a cynical look that made me suspicious of her real intentions. When the children started singing happy birthday, the mood became even more tense. Vanessa pulled FBio by the arm and took him to a corner of the house, where they whispered and laughed, as if they were planning something. I watched, feeling a mixture of sadness and anger, and it was at that moment that a friend of my mother came to tell me that there was someone waiting outside who wanted to talk to me. When I went out to meet this person, I almost fell over. It was Vanessa's mother. She was standing there on the sidewalk, her expression serious and her eyes hard. I didn't even know what to think. She greeted me with a short wave and said, "Erica, we need to talk. About Vanessa. About everything you don't know." At that moment, I felt a chill run down my spine. I invited her in and sat down next to her. The woman began to tell me stories that I could never have imagined. She said that Vanessa had a dark past, that she was not the sweet and innocent woman everyone thought she was, that she had been involved in cases of emotional manipulation, that she had abandoned other families, that she had no intention of staying with FBio, but rather of taking everything she could from him. She spoke with pain, as if she knew her daughter and at the same time tried to warn those she was harming. She showed me messages, documents, and even old photos that revealed a different Vanessa from the one I had seen at the party. A Vanessa capable of lying, manipulating, and using people to get what she wanted. I was in shock. My head was spinning with that flood of information. But one thing was clear. The Vanessa who came into my life was not just a lover. She was a bigger problem, a threat that I needed to face with all my strength. I returned to the party with a mixture of anger and determination. I knew I couldn't let that woman destroy my family, or worse, put my children in a situation of emotional risk. I decided I needed to act, intelligently but firmly. In the days that followed, I began to seek help. I spoke to lawyers, psychologists, for the boys, and sought support from my family and friends. I also kept Raphael close, the friend who had appeared like a beacon in my personal storm. He was my safe haven, my counselor, and also proof that I could be happy again. FBio, on the other hand, began to show signs of instability. Between his fights with Vanessa and his worries about the divorce, he seemed lost. The children witnessed arguments, shouting, and even moments when their father could not hold back his tears. It was a chaotic scene, and I felt the responsibility of protecting the little ones from that whirlwind. But it wasn't all suffering. Amidst the chaos, my children continued to be my light. Their smiles, hugs, and small daily achievements gave me the strength to carry on. And I realized that despite the betrayal, the pain, and the uncertainty, I had something that Vanessa would never have. The genuine love of a mother who would never give up. And it was because of this love that I made the decision that would change everything. To face Vanessa head on, not with shouting, not with violence, but with the truth. With the courage to show who I really am, who we are, as a family. The day of the confrontation was tense. Vanessa showed up at school to pick up the kids, and I was there waiting. She tried to be cordial, but her eyes were full of arrogance. I spoke firmly, showing that I would not be silenced, that I would not allow her to continue destroying our history. She laughed, said that I was a woman from the past, that he was happy with her, and that I should accept it and move on. I replied that moving on is exactly what I was doing, but in my own way, with dignity, and that I knew very well that true happiness cannot be bought with lies. Deep down, I knew that this fight wasn't just between me and Vanessa, but a fight for justice, for respect, for love. I was ready to fight for everything I had built, for myself, for my children, and for my life that wouldn't end with that betrayal. But what I didn't know is that this battle still had surprises in store that would change everything once again. After that confrontation at school, I felt something inside me change forever. It wasn't just anger or sadness. It was a strength I had never realized, a courage that came with the pain. I was determined to no longer be a victim, to fight for what was mine, for my dignity, for my children, for my life. Vanessa, despite all her arrogance, began to show her true colors in the following months. She tried to manipulate the children, force contact, use shared custody as a weapon against me. But I was prepared. I would not be fooled again. Bio, on the other hand, seemed increasingly lost in this whirlwind. The fights with Vanessa became frequent and intense, and I knew he was suffering, even if he didn't admit it. I saw my ex-husband in moments I never imagined, crying alone in his room, venting to me when no one else was around, asking for help to rebuild his life. I listened to it all with a heavy heart. On the one hand, he had hurt me deeply. On the other hand, I knew he was also a victim of his own mistake. This confused me. I wanted justice, but I also wanted peace. In the midst of all this, Raphael was an unwavering rock. He not only supported me, but he also became a true friend to my children. The boys liked him, and that gave me enormous comfort. I felt that, for the first time in a long time, I was not alone. But not everything was rosy. The legal battles continued. Vanessa did everything she could to complicate my life, making false accusations, trying to keep the children away from me, spreading lies wherever she went. I needed to be strong, not only for myself, but for the children. I remember a hearing where she tried to destabilize me. The judge asked about our relationship, and Vanessa, with that cynical smile, said things that were not true. She said that I was too strict, that I didn't let the boys see their father properly, that I was alienating the children. I was nervous, but I took a deep breath and told my truth, showing evidence and testimonies that dismantled each of her lies. At that moment, I felt a victory, not just for myself, but for everyone who has ever been a victim of someone who tries to destroy families out of selfishness and greed. That's when something unexpected happened. Bio showed up at home, alone, with tears in his eyes, asking to talk. He said he wanted to try to make peace, that he wanted to be a present and responsible father, that he was sorry for everything, that he wanted help to get out of that mess. I looked at him, and all I felt was a mixture of pain and hope. I wanted to believe that he could change, but I knew I couldn't be naive. Life had taught me to be cautious. We decided to start slowly, thinking about the best interests of our children. Custody became more balanced, and he started coming home more often, but without Vanessa around. She had disappeared after yet another scandal that ended in a police investigation, missing money, stolen objects from FBIO's old house. It was a cycle that seemed to be closing, and I felt that, finally, things could be sorted out. But there was still a problem inside me. Despite all these attempts at reconstruction, the fear and insecurity were still there. I was afraid to open up, to trust, to give myself over again. The trauma of betrayal, lies, and abandonment left deep scars. It was Raphael who helped me deal with this. He encouraged me to go to therapy, to look within and heal my wounds. I was reluctant at first, thinking I was too strong to need help, but I accepted, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. Therapy made me understand that the betrayal was not my fault, that I had not made a mistake in loving, trusting, or believing, that I needed to learn to love myself first. before I could truly love someone else. Each session was painful, but liberating. I cried, vented, relived scenes that I would rather forget. But each day I left feeling lighter, stronger. And so, slowly, I began to rebuild myself. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to give up, when the sadness seemed bigger than me. But I clung to my children, my family, Raphael, and my own strength. Today, I can say that I am no longer the same woman I was at the beginning of this story. I am more aware, more mature, more resilient. I learned that love is not about suffering in silence. That respect is fundamental in any relationship. That there is no excuse for those who betray, for those who abandon, for those who destroy. And most importantly, I learned that true strength lies in getting up when everything seems to be falling apart. But life still had one last surprise for me. Because in that same period, I received news that would shake everything up again. FBI was being sued because of the debts left by Vanessa. The justice system was going after him, and this could directly impact our children. I needed to decide quickly what to do: help the man who destroyed me or protect my children from possible financial and emotional collapse. After receiving the news of the lawsuit against FBIO, I found myself at a crossroads that seemed to have no easy way out. On one hand, I had the responsibility as a mother to protect my children from any impact that financial and emotional chaos could cause. On the other hand, there was a part of me that still saw the man who, despite everything, had been the father of my children and who at that moment needed help. It was a dilemma that consumed me day and night. At first, I tried to stay away. I decided that he should have to deal with the consequences of his choices alone, even though Vanessa's decisions had led him to this situation. But when I thought about what this could mean for the children, my heart sank. They deserved to have a father who was present, even if he was imperfect, and not a man who was destroyed by the weight of other people's mistakes. It was then, after many sleepless nights, that I decided I would do something. Not for him, but for them. I started looking for ways to help him get out of that mess, studying legal possibilities, talking to lawyers, and looking for alternatives so that FBIO's name would not be harmed and, most importantly, so that our children would not pay the price for the irresponsibility of that woman who came into our lives to cause destruction. Meanwhile, my relationship with Raphael grew stronger. He was always by my side, supporting me and giving me strength to face the most difficult moments. His presence helped me maintain my emotional balance and see that, despite everything, life could still be beautiful and full of possibilities. I felt that he really cared about me and my children, something that seemed so distant in the recent past. But Fabio wasn't ready to accept help. He resisted, and seemed too proud to admit that he needed me and others to get out of that situation. This frustrated me because I wanted him to recognize his mistakes, to show a real desire to change, not just an appearance. Furthermore, the legal process was ongoing, with hearings and deadlines that added to the tension in our already troubled lives. Vanessa remained a mystery, disappeared, but present in the shadows, like a ghost that no one could banish. The lawyers said she was trying to avoid responsibility, but no one knew where she was. In the midst of all this, the children tried to get on with their lives. I did my best to ensure that they had a peaceful routine, but it was impossible to deny that their father's presence still confused them, especially because of the conflict between us and the uncertainty about the future. The oldest began to ask difficult questions, wanting to understand why things were no longer the same, why his father no longer lived at home, and why that mysterious woman seemed to have destroyed everything. I tried to respond as best I could, with the right amount of truth for their age, without hiding the pain, but also without letting them lose hope. It was a daily challenge, but I knew I had to be strong for them. In this whirlwind of emotions, my relationship with Raphael became a safe haven not only for me, but for the whole family. He got involved with the boys naturally, participated in their chores, helped with school, and was always there. This made me realize that, even after so much pain, I could still believe in love and the possibility of rebuilding. But the past insisted on knocking on the door. In one of these hearings, an unpleasant surprise happened. Vanessa reappeared. With a clean face and a cold look, she appeared in the courtroom, causing discomfort to everyone. It seemed like she had come back to complicate the lives of all of us even more. She tried to justify herself, claiming personal problems and saying that she wanted to resolve everything peacefully. But no one believed her. Her lawyers tried to minimize the damage, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. F-Bio seemed shaken, as if he were reliving all the pain he had tried to forget. I stood firm, watching everything from afar, prepared for whatever was to come. I knew that the battle was far from over, and that I would need to be even stronger and more resilient to protect my children and my life. Meanwhile, Raphael and I began to plan the future, with the certainty that I needed someone by my side, not to replace the past, but to build something new, real and true. It was a decision that gave me fear, but also hope. And it was exactly when I was beginning to believe that everything could work out that I received the news that changed everything once again. F-Bio wanted to talk to me. A conversation that promised to shake up our world even more. When F-Bio called me and said he needed to talk, I didn't really know what to expect. After everything we had been through, after so much pain and upheaval, my mind was a whirlwind of doubts and fears. Deep down, I felt a mix of hope and fear. Hope that he really wanted to fix what he had broken, and fear of being fooled once again by the pretty words I had heard before. Life had taught me to be suspicious, to protect my heart. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe, somewhere away from the hustle and bustle of the city, where we could talk privately. When he arrived, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. Genuine regret, a vulnerability that touched me, even after everything. He looked tired, weighed down by the consequences of his mistakes, but also determined to change. Erica, he began, his voice cracking, I know I don't deserve it, but I need to apologize for everything, for what I did to you, to the kids, to our family. I messed up so much. I spent months blaming myself, trying to understand how. I destroyed what we had. I didn't mean to hurt you. I wanted to be the husband you deserved, but I failed. I want to try to make it right, if you'll let me. I took a deep breath, feeling a lump in my throat. It would be easy to let the hurt get the better of me, to give up and close this door forever. But it was also hard to deny that deep down, there was still a piece of the man I loved and trusted. It was a difficult decision, full of risks, but I wanted to try. Fabio, I said in a firm voice, it's not just a question of wanting it or not wanting it. You need to show it, prove it with your actions, not just with your words. I need to see that this time it's different, that you're going to do this for our children and for me, not out of pride or fear. He agreed, his eyes welling up. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And so we began, slowly, trying to rebuild the communication that had been lost, the respect that had been broken, the trust that had been destroyed. It was not an easy journey. We had ups and downs, doubts, moments when the wounds seemed to open again. I found myself thinking about the nights I had stayed up crying, the secrets and lies that had destroyed me. But little by little, F-Bio showed real changes. He attended school meetings, doctor's appointments, and the boys' parties. He made an effort to be truly present, not as a figurehead, but as a father who took responsibility for his actions. And this, as hard as it was to accept, was something that helped me believe that perhaps it was possible to move forward. Of course, it wasn't perfect. The memory of the betrayal haunted me. The fear of being hurt again paralyzed me at times. But Raphael, who was by my side, was a light during that storm. He didn't demand anything from me. He didn't demand anything in a hurry. He just showed me that love can be rebuilt, that forgiving isn't forgetting, but choosing to move forward without carrying the weight of the past. This duality consumed me, the possibility of a new beginning with F-Bio and the security and affection of Raphael. It was difficult to reconcile the two feelings because each represented a part of me, the past and the future, the pain and the hope. Meanwhile, Vanessa remained a distant shadow. Although she was gone, her impact was still felt in our lives. Fabio was dealing with the financial and legal consequences of her death, and this brought us together, in a way, around our children. She was an open wound that would not heal, a constant reminder of what had been destroyed. Until, one unexpected day, I saw her again. It was in the morning, as I was leaving school, when I was picking up the children. She was standing there, with a different look in her eyes, dejected, tired, as if her mask of arrogance had fallen off. She stared at me for a moment, without saying a word, then turned and walked away. I stood there, with a heavy heart and a mixture of feelings that I couldn't decipher. At that moment, I understood that she was also a lost woman, a victim of her own choices and the consequences she faced. This didn't erase what she did, but it made me reflect on everything I went through, the pain of betrayal, the struggles, the scars I carried. I realized that I was on a different path, a path of healing, of learning, of rebuilding. That, despite the open wounds, I would not be defined by them. That the past, however painful it was, could be the basis for becoming a stronger, more aware woman. I learned that true love is not perfect. It is not free from suffering, but it is capable of withstanding storms and growing stronger. That happiness is not in the absence of pain, but in the courage to move forward despite it. And above all, I understood that my happiness is in my hands, in my self-love, in the care I have for my children and myself. Now, looking forward, I wonder if forgiveness is the path to the freedom I seek, or if some wounds are so deep that they never fully heal. Reaching this point in my story, after everything I've been through, is a mixture of relief, sadness, learning, and also a certain fear of the future. I never imagined that a betrayal could shake not only my marriage so much, but my entire life, my self-esteem, my faith in love. Today, almost a year after that day when he left home to work and came back with another woman in his arms, I can finally tell how it all ended. Or rather, how it all continues, because life is just that. A succession of chapters that open and close, but never really end. After that initial conversation with FBio, where he apologized and said he wanted to start over, I made it clear that nothing would be easy. I didn't want to be deceived again, and I didn't want our children to grow up in an environment of lies and distrust. So we decided to take it slow. We tried to get back together, but carefully, with lots of talking, therapy, and effort on both sides. FBio started to come home more often. He was more involved in our children's routine, and this was essential for me to take another step towards rebuilding our relationship. I saw in him a different man, a father willing to fix his mistakes. But the wounds were still open. The pain of betrayal doesn't go away overnight, and my insecurity sometimes made me question whether this new path was just another illusion. I also needed to understand what I wanted for myself. Raphael was still present in my life, a true friend who, without asking for anything in return, offered me support, affection, and stability. His presence helped me rebuild my self-esteem, to remember that I deserved love and respect even after everything I had been through. This duality between Fabio and Raphael was, at the same time, a source of comfort and confusion. I wanted the past, but I was also afraid of it. I wanted the future that Raphael offered me, but I felt guilty for thinking about moving on while there was still something with Fabio. It was a whirlwind of feelings, an internal battle that only I could face. During this process, news came that changed everything. Vanessa, the woman who came into our lives to destroy our family, was arrested. She was accused of financial fraud in a series of scams that affected not only FBio, but many other people. Justice finally reached the one I always saw as a threat, a shadow that refused to leave us alone. Knowing that she was far away, behind bars, brought me immense relief. It was like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but at the same time, I felt a deep sadness. Because behind the arrogant and manipulative woman, I knew there was a lost person who chose the wrong path and hurt many people, including me and my children. With Vanessa out of my life, I was able to focus on what really mattered: my family's healing, our recovery of balance, and especially the well-being of the boys. They who had suffered so much began to show signs of overcoming. Smiles returned to their faces. Joy once again found its way into our home. Today, I look at myself and see a transformed woman. I am no longer that insecure, fragile person, destroyed by betrayal. I am someone who has learned to love herself, to value herself, to fight for herself and her children. I understand that love is not perfect, that it can have flaws, but that it is built daily, with respect, truth, and courage. As for FBio, we keep trying. We don't promise perfection, because we know that nothing is easy after so much suffering. But there is sincerity, a desire to make things right, and a commitment to doing the best for our children. Raphael continues to be a dear friend, a support system that reminds me that I can be happy and loved, even after so much pain. This story doesn't have a classic fairy tale ending. It has ups and downs, difficult decisions, forgiveness, and learning. It is real, like so many others that happen out there, silent and painful. And I hope that by sharing my story, I can help anyone who is going through something similar. I want them to know that they are not alone, that pain can be overcome, that it is possible to get back on your feet and be happy again. And you? What would you do if you were in my place? Could you forgive someone who betrayed you so deeply? Or do you think some wounds are impossible to heal? Leave your honest comment here. Your opinion can help not only me, but other people who face this silent battle. If this story touched you, like, share, and subscribe to the channel to follow more real, exciting, and impactful stories like this one. Thank you so much for following me this far. Always remember, you deserve love, respect, and happiness. Never give up fighting for yourself.